Hey everybody. Been on a bit of hiatus for making videos and podcasts. We're going to get back to the podcasts coming up soon where we'll finish out the political mantra podcast and then go on from there. So that is coming. In the meantime, I'm going to post several older videos that I did several years ago, but I didn't ever upload to YouTube. And it's just me going through the debate of free will versus determinism, the philosophical debate between those two things. Are we free creative actors, free agents? Can we sort of create outside of determined causation, or does the law of causation sort of envelop everything and we are under it and therefore not free? That's one way to think about it. I present it a little bit differently in the videos, but that's the conversation that's going on there. So if you're interested in that, stick around. I've seen people talking about it recently as well, so hopefully it's of general interest. I also, made a couple videos now about capitalism and had mostly positive things to say in that regard. And so I thought I'd make a video about communism and maybe the positives we can find in communism. I think it's important to recognize positives in anything, and especially positive intent and the positive goals that we have. And because we all seek the good, right? We seek what we perceive as good, and we're motivated by the good. So it's not like communists are, there's all the communists out there, and I'm saying communists broadly. We can argue elsewhere about distinguishing between socialists and communists, but for now I'm just saying communists. Take that as you will. It's not as though communists, the majority of them out there, are actively seeking destruction and evil. And even those of them who are, as a part of the program of revolution, they are doing it towards an end that they see as good and justifying the revolution. So we are all motivated by some good in the end. And so that's important to recognize. And so I think we can pretty easily say that communism is driven by a good vision. Now, I've heard people talk about how communism is only good in theory, and then people even say, well, communism isn't even good in theory. But if we take even a step back from that, what drives communism and maybe many things in life is not so much the theory, but the vision. And the vision that's painted of communism is the vision of the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's a vision of mutual, universal charity, peace and goodwill towards men, after the revolution, after setting it up. Once it's set up, then peace on earth, goodwill towards men, and universal charity and support. That's the vision of the kingdom of heaven on earth. That's what communists are animated by, ultimately. Or should we say, largely. And that's important to recognize and say, hey, actually, we want that too. We're seeking the same thing. I just don't think you're going to find it that way, right? That would be a separate conversation of how we get there and why we think one way over the other way. But there are tons of people in the world now, because communism's gotten more popular, obviously. And there are tons of people in the world right now who are motivated by the vision of communism. Well, they're all really excited about the kingdom of heaven on earth. That's great. That's a great starting point. Hey, you see there's something that's not kingdom of heaven-y, right, about this here now, and you believe in the possibility of the kingdom of heaven and you want to get there and you want everyone to get there. Awesome. Great. Let's do that. So the why of communism, I would say, is the vision of the kingdom of heaven, the vision of utopia, right? But we are well, unless you're basically a nihilist, you are motivated by a utopia, as in a great good, right? The good end. The problem is when you become a utopianist, when you get so animated by utopianism, and you let that drive you in the wrong way. And I would say the difference in this sense between Christians and communists, I would say, whatever you want to say, balanced Christians and communists, is that Christians don't believe that humans working on their own are capable of producing utopia. And humans as they are now, and humans on their own. And I would say, actually, communists kind of agree. That's why communists are known for their re-education programs, because they believe that humans as they are not capable of producing and living under communism. So they have to recreate humanity, even restructure human nature so that we can be people who live under communism. And again, Christians pretty much agree. Humans as they are now need to be changed, maybe not all the way down to their nature, though some Christians would agree, but they need to be deeply changed in order to become a new kind of thing, a new kind of humanity that can live in the kingdom of heaven, the utopia state. And then the question is, well, where does that transformation come from? And then it's like, well, the people who are here are going to transform the people who need to be transformed. But how did the people who are going to do the transforming get transformed? It's like, well, reading a book, right? Or hearing a theory, or hearing a professor. Well, okay. But then why do we need a deep re-education? Because we could just go through normal education, apparently. Anyhow, there's a bunch of reasons why not communism. But Christians believe that the divine has to step in and actually transform humans through a divine transformation to inaugurate the actual divine kingdom, the actual practical utopia that comes about through divine aid. Anyhow, it has been pointed out before, and it's worth noting, and it is true, that there are many aspects of Christianity, of Jesus' teaching, and the lives and teachings of the early apostles and early followers of the church of Jesus that are very socialistic or communistic. And people have said, oh, Jesus was a socialist. Well, that's true. It's true to an extent. It's true that there are those elements. I mean, the early Christians did live as what we would look back and we might call them communist. They actually didn't have the same program and goal of revolution and reform by the same means. So that's an important difference. But they did pool their resources, and they did live in a way that's very similar to Marx's statement of from everyone according to his ability to everyone, each according to his need. In the church, it was everyone who has means gave to those who were in need. And there's a statement from the Old Testament as well. Those who had much didn't have too much, and those who had little didn't have too little. So there are these ideas there, and there is the idea of extreme generosity and free charity and all that sort of stuff that ties in there. And so, Christians do have the idea of a sweeping, wide, divine, unbelievable charity at the core of their ideal and sometimes at the core of their practice. And communists also claim that that's what they're after. Whether or not they practice that is another question. But not that Christians obviously do it very well either, so there is room to argue there. But what I haven't heard, and I'm going to say another positive side on communism after this, but I'll point out, I hear people talking about the socialism of Jesus and the communism of the early church. Of course, it was completely voluntary, not compulsory, and not centralized and all that. But what hasn't been pointed out that I have seen is throughout the Bible, the one of the most common descriptions of a hellish social state, a society that's completely unjust, a society that is broken, that is terrible, that is hell on earth. This society is described most frequently that I saw. I didn't do a numbers talliation, but it's very common for that to be described in the Bible as a state where you do not receive the benefits of your labor. You do not receive the rewards of your labor. So while there are communistic and socialistic elements, there's also things cutting against that grain. And on the positive side, the images that Jesus uses and the teachings of early Christianity talk about merit, and they talk about the kingdom of heaven, people being judged by their works, people being rewarded for their works and getting recompense for that. So yes, there's stuff that goes more in the direction of communism than, I don't know, people who think capitalism is Christian want to believe. But it certainly isn't the case that communism as we know it is Christian. And I'll say another thing that the communists have zeroed in on that I think is good is this idea of equity. And the idea of equity is the idea of perfect justice, right? You've got your perfect system and you've got perfect equity, and that's perfect justice. That's how we get peace, right? We're not going to have peace until there's perfect justice, because injustice is bad and not part of utopia. So Thomas Sowell points out, he calls the modern communists seekers after cosmic justice, and he means, universal, all-encompassing, perfect justice, not just big and broad sweeping, but really divine and supernatural justice is the kind of justice that they look for. And that is the kind of justice that Christians also look for. And equity, true equity, would be an assessment of all the different things that go into your life, all the things that were before you, and weight everything exactly perfectly for you. You had this decision before you, but did you really know it was before you? Because you had all this, whatever, you had past trauma, you had something else you were distracted by at the moment, you were emotional about this thing, whatever it was, the infinite panoply of things that need to be considered and weighed would result in the perfect equity, perfect judgment, and perfect justice of rewarding and reprimanding, punishing your behavior, delivering perfect justice. And so communists are looking for divine justice. Hey, great, so are we. The problem is they're like, well, we'll deliver it. And their program for delivering equity is, well, we'll split people up into ethnic groups, and if that ethnic group is having a different outcome than this ethnic group, then we'll punish the one who's doing better so that they're even. So the divinity kind of goes away real quick. And it's an important point to notice, because this is a search for cosmic justice, because an infinite God is the only person who could actually deliver equity. The only true deliverer of equity would be omniscient God who has all information and perfect judgment. So if you want equity, you can't find it from a human. But the hope of Christians is that there will actually be equity. We just don't look for it in this world and under human governments. So all that being said, there's things to see in communism and socialism in the modern landscape as it's getting more popular. And it's definitely good to be up on the most effective criticisms that can break through people's perceptions and understandings, but I think you also do have to recognize the positive intent, and you also have to recognize the longing, the hope, and the desire there. These people, I think it is most beneficial for us to look at this and say we have a nation and a world full of people who are yearning for divine justice, who are longing for a perfect world. And while we do need to have the conversation, hey, you're not going to get it right now. And you need to not make things worse because you're upset about that. Yeah, true. That's fair. But we also don't need to just be cynical and be like, well, these people are dumb and naive and just evil and terrible and whatever else. Well, actually, we all want the same things. Unless we're nihilists, we want the kingdom of perfect righteousness and justice and charity to reign on earth. And we want to move towards that and help it into its fruition here. So where our goals are actually in common, at least at the end of ends, it's the proximate steps there that we disagree about. And there's plenty of fruit for disagreement and discussion on those, but it does help to recognize the positive intent, and even though maybe feels a little hackneyed at the moment. Anyhow, I wanted to put that out there and let you know about the new old videos of free will coming up. If you're interested in those, stick around and check them out. Make sure to interact, like, comment, and share would be really helpful. Thanks, and God bless you all.